So tonight, I want to talk about the comprehensive plan. I really appreciate Mike Bailey and Larry taking the time to come. I met with Mike Bailey last week, maybe the week before, and we just addressed the concerns that I had brought to this group at our October meeting, which were just a couple of my concerns that I saw in a quick perusal of the document, because I wanted to look at it before it was passed, and if there was something concerning, bring those up at that point. So that's kind of where we've been. And since that time, the plan is 163 pages. I have read it in its entirety. I've made a lot of notes. And so let me just kind of show you. So I have a 14-page document of just everything that I highlighted. If I had a question about it, if I had a concern, whatever, it has the quote from the plan, and then it has comments. Sometimes it defines a term. It has links. So this document will be available to everybody. This would be really boring if I just read this whole thing tonight. So what I've done is I've picked out some terms that I think are relevant for us to understand, and that's what I'm going to cover. So let's dig in. Okay. So this is a citizen's review. By citizen, it means me. So the purpose, I have learned all kinds of things in the last few weeks. The purpose of a comprehensive plan is to plan for the future growth of a community. So the plan that you see up there, comprehensive land use plan, that was the 1999 Bartlesville plan. It focused on parks, roads, zoning for the most part. The new plan incorporates those areas, but also spends time focusing on the social aspects of our community. So it covers parks, neighborhoods, commercial, activity centers, zonings, and roads on pages 41 through 98, which is kind of what I saw as the most similar to the land use plan of 99. It also covers economic development, attainable housing, educational advancement, neighborhoods, culture, parks, health, natural resources, built environment, and public infrastructure and services. And so the plan has expanded kind of its breadth. And as a Republican, this is always where my concern kind of focuses is, are we growing government? And are we, putting more burden on the rights of the individual? And so that's kind of just a very fast, you can go access both plans online and see them and compare them for yourself. I also wanted to see if there was a United Nations agenda in this plan. And so I will say from the outset that, I believe that the committee was acting in what they felt was the best interest to our community. So none of this is an attack. This is research that I have done and I want to bring to our community. The United Nations and subsidiary organizations have an interest in these plans. And that's kind of what I want to address tonight. I want to kind of show the path of how that type of agenda could get itself into a plan like this. So these are these 17 sustainable goals, development goals of the United Nations. And you can see at the bottom, those are quotes from the United Nations. The survival of our societies and our shared planet depends on a more sustainable world. There you say it's like three main prongs: economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection. And so they spend a lot of time and effort to put forward these global goals all across the world, from Africa to Europe to here in the United States. The concern with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is their emphasis on environmental and social justice practices, because these are globalist ideologies and they're not in line with the goals of the United States of America, which is a constitutional republic. And the concern is that these types of goals will lead to more and more government control in our lives. And so the way this works is that United Nations puts out a lot of documents, resolutions, seminars, all kinds of things on these topics. And then what happens is nonprofits all over the world then take that agenda and bring it into their organization. And so if you look across like a stream of nonprofits, I looked at probably 15, 20 nonprofits, you'll see, oh, there's that word. They're using similar language, similar goals. Now, many of these are good ideas for spaces and places. but they should be done by the private sector. And so the concern is to use government funds and government regulations to force these types of agendas into our communities. And so I just put up here 2 of the nonprofits referenced in the plan. One of them is the 10-minute walk, and I will talk more about why 10 minutes matters and how it kind of plays in. But you'll kind of see the language of this website, Park Equity Accelerators. There's a lot of emphasis on equity. You'll see it in the mission statement. We call on mayors to accelerate the creation of parks that are equitable, healthy, and thriving. And so it's a building towards equity. Now, let's step back. Equity, right, is in opposition to equality, right? So equality is we all are offered an opportunity, kind of the American dream. You know, everybody in America is given an opportunity if they work hard enough to build a great life, right? Equity is let's make sure everybody gets there and let's kind of force it on the people and force outcomes. Government shouldn't be in the business of forcing outcomes, okay? So it's one of the tied-in organizations, again, so you're seeing the trickle of those UN principles into nonprofits. The other one is this Vision Zero network. Now, this is one that wants to make our roads safer, which I think all of us, we want safer roads. The concern is kind of how some of this is being done and what burden it's going to put on a community to do it. And another thing you'll see in their language, I have it kind of highlighted, it's probably small. One of the things they want to deal with is higher carbon emissions. Higher carbon emissions is tied to the green and climate change efforts of the United Nations. And they want to reduce carbon, which we actually had a speaker here a couple months ago who explains that our world actually needs more carbon, not less, if you look at it very scientifically with no political agenda. And so you'll see throughout all of this, and then you'll see in this Vision Zero network another emphasis point. Vision Zero action plans should commit to employing enforcement strategies that will not result in racial profiling. So you see equity, racial, avoiding racism and justice, social justice, kind of all spread throughout all of these different resources. And so I tried to kind of boil this down, and this is my kind of flow chart. You've got the United Nations. Currently, their big promotion is the Sustainable Development Goals. Those then get filtered to nonprofits and governments. I mean, Department of Transportation, HUD, like all over the world, all kinds of organizations, right? And then those get used as resources in plans in small communities like ours. And so what kind of the result of this is it's moving us to a more sustainable, by, of course, the UN has their definition of sustainable, urban, and environmental community. And then these things get enforced by city government agencies, codes, and regulations. And so, again, good ideas, but not all of them are good ideas, but there are good ideas in here. Like, we do want less people to die in car accidents. I think that's a great goal. But how are we implementing this? And how is that safety being offset by taking away the rights and the freedom of the individual? So that is just kind of the flow that you'll see the information travel. Now, what I'm going to cover is basically 2 things. In reading through the document, I found at least 51 ways that it grows government, and then I found 37 references easily found within the United Nations and those surrounding organizations around them, and then at least seven additional references to equity. And so the document that I showed at the beginning covers all of these, but for tonight, I'm just going to cover an overview of how it grows government, and then I'm going to talk about some of the UN ideas, and then maybe a path forward that we could pursue together. So first, we're going to cover government growth. And so this is just a list. I'm sorry, guys. We transferred this format, so it didn't quite. Oh, it does. It looks great on the screen. Great. So this is the areas that the government would expand. Now, some of these are new entirely. Some of them may just be an expansion of the program currently in place. So I'll read some of these. Some of these, are places, again, that our government is in right now. Some of them would be new or more expensive. So investing in infrastructure, education, technology, sustain prosperity by the diversification of economic portfolio. And then it gets into some more specifics. Incorporate common areas, amenity centers, or other privately maintained social spaces into multi-building or multi-unit development. The question is, okay, we're putting a space into a private space. Who's controlling that? Who's dictating that? Who's financing that? Next, we have activity centers that'll be incentivized by tax dollars. We have an indoor recreation community center, and it says that this would be funded by the city budget. We have character corridors, which are areas that enhance the character of our community. Again, might be a good idea, but maybe should be done by wayfinding and branding for our community. We have more tax credits to business owners, so they have different incentives programs to business owners. We have an assistance program to repairing aging homes. We have expand housing incentive, also coordinating the homelessness assistance, workforce development, early childhood education, little libraries. I don't know if you've seen these in your neighborhood, but they in your neighborhood, you can drop off books, pick up books. Privately in some neighborhoods right now, this would be the government doing this. Accessible employment, investing in art, performing arts, community center, incentives for medical and mental health, community gardens, which I lived in a community with a community garden. It was cutting down just weeks. Again, I think these things are better done privately than by our government. And then the film industry incentive. And my husband and I actually work in film professionally, and film generally is going to make your community start to move more liberal. You can actually see that in the voter dynamics of communities that are even states that have brought in the film incentive. And so as much as I love the film industry, I do not think we need to be putting more tax dollars to this. Another concerning area was there was an action item that they had done a survey for recycling, and the community wanted on-curb recycling. And so to research that makes sense. But the next one was a composting survey where they had surveyed the community on if the community wants some sort of composting program. And the answer was no. That survey, the result was no. And so the recommendation in the plan was to have another survey to see if people wanted composting. And so I see in this plan the ability to use government and government funds to continue growing through very many areas of our lives. And I believe what is best for communities is the decentralization, deregulation, and allowing the people and communities to build those things that they love and want to upkeep and help thrive. Taxpayer funds, is that better? Thank you. Okay, so it also talks about neighborhoods. So these are some areas it recommends. And let me back up one thing. So this is a plan that makes a lot of recommendations, and then all of these have to be acted on. And so these are the recommendations in the plan. Some of them would actually take the writing of code, or as we'll see later, other factors to actually implement this. So this is the impact on Bartlesville neighborhoods. Consolidation of driveways, which to me is unclear and concerning because I don't know how that would actually happen and how that affects private property. Adopt development provisions that provide for greater diversity in housing choice. Another quote, this was a quote, residents can partner with the city and other organizations to proactively conserve their neighborhood environment, which is kind of open-ended. You know, what does that mean? Who are we working with? Who is funding it? Who is regulating it? All the questions. There's a neighborhood organization registration where you can register your neighborhood organization with the city. There's a way to enforce the nuisance code through those organizations. And then there's a recommendation to add a couple of ordinances. One would be a historic preservation ordinance, One would be to add a citywide architectural manual. One would be water conservation policies. So, and my understanding is this plan wasn't really focused on the water issues that Bartlesville is facing. This is the only mention of water that I found in the plan. And this is water conservation, like that was one of the solutions they offered. Let's continue having more regulation on how water is used, was kind of the emphasis of that. And then a tree preservation ordinance. And this gets concerning. What if I want to cut down a tree on my yard? It's my yard. And how is the city interacting with that? And what are the regulations part of it? So that was the neighborhoods. So then we get to the practical, which is the changes to city governance. And so this is to update the zoning plan and map, to expand parks, to expand pathway by 19 miles, to do a comprehensive code assessment, to establish the framework for land development code reform, to prepare revised or new development codes to implement these plans, and to reevaluate the downtown plan. So this plan is kind of the spark of changes on a lot of different levels of codes throughout our community. And then I just listed the new government jobs and departments that would be created on as this plan. So it has a community housing planner, a neighborhood conservation coordinator. This is a volunteer park ranger program, so I don't know if that would have cost to the city, but that is in there. Mental health specialist for pathway, and it says that actually the funding for that's already been granted to the police department. So that's all I know about that, but that's what it lists. And then they had this idea to combine parks planning, facility management, and programming under a unified department. Again, I don't know a lot about how those departments function, so I'm just listing changes or things like that. And so what I found is, in looking at this plan, I understand a comprehensive land use plan, that zoning and things like that are what cities do. But what this is doing, I feel like, is reaching beyond just basic zoning to impact our neighborhoods, our community in deeper ways that we all should tread very carefully if those are changes that we want in our community. And I'll get to more of my kind of conclusionary thoughts after this. So that's the growth of government. The second part is the United Nations impact on this plan. And I did some digging on the terms that are used in this plan and how they tie into the United Nations and kind of the ideology behind some of them. The sources that I used are listed here. I won't read all of them. You guys can read them. World Health Organization, United Nations, Smart Growth America, Urban Sustainability Directors Network, C40 Knowledge Hub, which is a climate change organization, NIH, and so Department of Transportation, Urban Network. If you look at a lot of the organizations talking about some of these terms that I'm going to get into, you'll see a bent towards environmental climate change and a move towards urbanism. And I would say that Bartlesville is a small town. We're a small town for a reason. We have great amenities. And I don't think urbanism should be the goal of where we're going in the next 20 years. And the other thing that I didn't see in these types of terminology and sources was an emphasis on the free market and private property, which should always be held at the utmost for a plan like this. So I did not cover every single term, but I will cover some of them. One of their emphases was on accessory dwelling units. I'll get into this more in a little bit, but this fits into basically mixed use. So you have neighborhoods right now who have large lots and large homes. This is the ability to add these accessory dwelling units onto those properties to start to mix the use of your neighborhoods. One of the things I read is that there are regulatory and infrastructure considerations that come with using these. And again, I am not a zoning expert, but knowing some of those, I think, would be imperative before something like this is employed community. The other thing is that they're often used in urban areas like Portland in California. And so again, is this a good fit for Bartlesville? So this is mixed use development. And basically this is a huge push to start to build mixed use areas. And so this is from the United Nations. We commit ourselves to promoting the development of urban spatial frameworks, including urban planning and design instruments that support sustainable management and use of natural resources and land. Appropriate compactness and density, that's a huge emphasis. Are we building cities dense enough? So they actually want them more dense. Polycentrism, mixed uses, infill, planned urban extension, and such. And then it talks about what this actually does. It strengthens food system planning, enhances resource efficiency, urban resilience, and environmental sustainability. And again, the question is kind of what's the root of why we're bringing in this type of use? I also found the United Nations say that temporary measures on mixed-use neighborhoods, alternative mobility, and urban regeneration in response to the pandemic should be translated into longer-term action. To kind of watch through some of the UN materials, you'll see that they're like, hey, like what happened to the pandemic, let's like now make that life every day for that mixed use. And so that's mixed use, and it is an emphasis in the plan, and I'm not sure it's a fit for Bartlesville. So a lot of these terms tie together. The next one is infill development. So this is adding new structures on vacant or underused parcels. Again, there could be a time and place for this. My concern is the emphasis that this could be used as a climate solution and is part of putting forward 15-minute cities. And in the lower corner of all of these, I've listed like what United Nations Sustainable Development Goal it ties into, so you can kind of see some of that. So that is infill development. So we have this, this mixing of neighborhoods and sizes of homes and all of this. And now the next layer is the green infrastructure. So this is moving our infrastructure to more adaptive, eco-friendly practices. And this supports international, environmental, and sustainable development frameworks. So we're seeing kind of this sort of community that's created where we have lots of uses, small spaces, more urban, in the different terms that are being used, like green infrastructure. Another one is regulations to incentivize sustainable design. And so this is called low impact design, and it minimizes environmental disruption and promotes sustainability. And so the concern kind of comes in on what regulations are being pushed in the plan, right, that are going to force some of these designs. And this starts to have kind of a ripple effect of now we have new regulation, we have more eco-friendly costs more money. It's going to make it less doable for developers because they're going to have less margin, and it starts to kind of stack, and it can really hurt a community with how this is all employed. And then this is one of the actions from the plan, and probably like just total paragraphs. So this is on energy efficiency, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll read some terms from it. They want to upgrade city-owned buildings with energy-efficient technologies. They want electric or low-emission vehicles for all city-owned vehicles and public transportation. They want to reduce car dependency, expand bike lanes and walking paths, launch public awareness campaigns on energy conservation and sustainable practices, and reduce energy use and achieve long-term sustainability. This is very tied to green energy driven practices in our government and in regulations. So that is also in the plan. And now we get to how this affects zoning. And so there are two types of zoning. And so this plan wants to prioritize form-based zoning. And form-based zoning prioritizes the form of the built environment over the specific use. I've talked to some developers about form-based zoning. One of the hardest things about form-based zoning is how much it lengthens your zoning code, because it's very hard to define and research and set a objective standard for form-based zoning. And so that's one of the issues with it. And then the enforcement of it is also hard to keep that objective. I found this quote on one of these sources. They call conventional zoning, also known as Euclidean zoning, as exclusionary zoning. Inflexible, actively supports segregation, low-density communities necessitate car use, which have resulted in a host of inequalities and disparate health outcomes. And so they want us to move to less cars, more equity. I believe that Bartlesville likes our cars and our size of lots and sprawl as it currently stands. So there's some implications of using form-based zoning. So this fits right in with the mixed use planning. Obviously, it moves us more urban. I actually read it could hinder the participation by the public. What I've heard is that it's hard to implement because it's nebulous in some respects. And then I found this quote that says zoning reform can advance racial equity, support housing attainability, create healthy communities, decarbonize buildings to mitigate climate change. So obviously many of the proponents that are pushing this from the UN down to these nonprofits that are handing them to communities like ours, who are just a community that want to be a wonderful community to live in. But many of them, those organizations and nonprofits tied to the UN, have some agenda behind what they're doing. I did read, it was like an op-ed from a city that was potentially moving to form-based, and they said they're tricky to implement and are definitely not a solution to the challenges that zoning faces. And I actually talked to a developer, and he said there's a different way to do it that's more incorporates the developer in the process, but it wouldn't necessarily be like community-wide changing of zoning. This is just another term that I found. So place-based initiatives, place-based is like, it sounds good, right? Like, let's focus on our place or whatever. But I just want to bring up that almost all of these terms can be tied to some agendas. For example, this is place-based initiatives aim to improve quality of life and access to opportunity, particularly people of color and people with low income who live in neighborhoods and cities experiencing disinvestment. So all these terms need to be researched for the impact that they're going to have in our community. All right, we're almost there. My last section is streets. So there's multiple terms on streets that are in the plan. This term is green streets. And the concern with this is that they want to make more landscaped area, narrower roads. And I don't think thank you. I knew I was going to forget eventually here. So the green streets, that's the concern, is that they're going to put more landscape area, less road. There's also some mentions in the plan of things like bioretention features. One of those could be rain gardens. And the question again, who's enforcing this? Is there government money or government regulation going into some of these features? And then xeriscaping is environmentally friendly. And again, there's nothing wrong with being friendly to the environment, but how is it being enforced and what is the goal? And are we prioritizing people's rights first and foremost? So those are green streets. I have 3 types of street terms here. Okay, the next one is livable streets. This is often integrated into form-based codes. So all of this kind of works together. Urban plans to promote sustainable, inclusive growth. Aligns with Vision Zero, which wants to eliminate traffic fatalities, supports the objectives of global initiatives like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. By promoting livable streets, communities can develop urban spaces that promote mobility, inclusivity, and a higher standard of living. So now, this is a line that I found in the plan. As a goal, reducing residents' reliance on motor vehicle transportation and improving safety. And this is obviously a United Nations goal, and it moves us towards lessening the climate impact is the goal of that. Okay, so then, hang on, guys. All right, there we go. This is requiring parkland as part of new development. And so I think the questions here are obvious. You know, what weight is that putting on the developer? This is obviously to, you know, the UN wants this because more equity, more health, more resilient societies. But what, on the converse side, what weight is it putting on the developers and individuals? There's a big emphasis on cycling. So I just went ahead and quoted from the UN website on cycling. Obviously, there are people who love to cycle, but how much emphasis do we want on that in our community? And they say that cycling is directly tied to 11 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so this is an image that I think is kind of helpful. It was finally a visual of the many, many words that I've said. And so this is moving our streets. So that picture on the right is before complete streets. Complete streets is another, you have livable streets, green streets, complete streets. This other one is after complete streets. My concern is, you know, which streets will this type of infrastructure be added to? Obviously, what's the cost, all of that. What's it going to do to speed on that street? On Cherokee, downtown, you know, First Baptist has a crossing with a light. People have to stop so we can get from the parking lot into First Baptist. That works there. It's not a high traffic street. You know, I don't think it's too much of an inconvenience. But if we tried to implement this on Washington, you'd automatically have to bring the speed per hour way down. And you just have to start reworking the entire street. And then what is the benefit of this? Like, is the cost of this, both in dollars and regulation, but also in impact on motor users' lives, what's the cost benefit then to cyclists, and is that a good place for it? And that's one of the issues, is some of these things are not defined as to where and when they'll be used. And so, so when we have so much emphasis in a plan to add in cycling and these types of things, it could really change our community, and we need to make sure it's better. And I'm not convinced at this point that it is. I also found on the Complete Streets website, quote, the vast majority of the 30 cities studied have policies which should result in equitable sidewalk networks. To achieve equity under this system, cities need to offer financial assistance and proactive sidewalk inspection, a standard met only by San Francisco and Denver. I don't know that Bartlesville wants the standards of San Francisco and Denver on how our streets are constructed. So all of this are terms related to the 15-minute city. And so you'll find throughout the plan terms of, let's make sure this is within a 10-minute walk for this person, so there's equity, so that they can get there, you know, within 10 minutes. This is kind of, these are the things that lead us to a 15-minute city. That's the goal of a 15-minute city, is that everything is really accessible and like nearby, and that you can do it by walking, and that you reduce traffic, and that you support sustainable living, and that you're more inclusive. So these are the 15-minute cities. This is one of the huge goals of the United Nations right now, is to promote the 15-minute cities. My concern with the 15-minute cities is we're Oklahomans. Maybe we don't want everything within 15 minutes. Maybe I live 45 minutes from Tulsa for a reason, because I like my quiet neighborhood, that the neighbors know each other and trust each other, and it's like the 1950s. And, you know, to make this type of move for our community needs to be something that the community really wants to do, and that's wise for our community. And I'm not convinced that that's a direction our community wants to go. And so we see many terms when put together, kind of, I hope I kind of like that there's a picture kind of forming of what they want, which are these green areas next to streets where people walk and cycle and do all these things within 10 minutes of their home. And it sounds really utopian, but the problem is, for government to pull this off, it's got a high cost, it's got high regulation. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't, even if we all were on board with this move, it doesn't always work. And so there are communities who have implemented these measures, and these things just go unused. Developers are not interested because of the raised cost. And so we need to be very, very cautious about employing these type of things into our plan. For the sake of reference, I want to show a short video. This is a video of a city they're building in the desert of the Middle East. It's a 15-minute city, and I think that it's important for us to always see where the end could head and what it could do to our daily lives, and decide if we want to be headed down a road that, obviously, if Bartlesville became a 15-minute city, it wouldn't look just like this. But are these the kind of goals that we want to be pursuing? Let's talk about practically, where do we go from here? Okay, so there is a requirement in Oklahoma statute that we have comprehensive plans, right? We have the 99 plan, there's a requirement. There's no requirement for how often they're updated. There are minimal requirements about what that plan includes. It doesn't include everything that's in the current plan. Not all of that is mandated. And so technically, you could always go back to the 99 plan and just scrap the new one. But I think we all understand cities grow, times change, technology changes. There should be updates to these things. And so in looking over this plan, I actually reached out to a land developer in Colorado. He has fought against the implementation of the green agenda into these plans, and he has helped multiple towns and communities write zoning, city code, and he actually wrote a comprehensive plan. So I went and looked at that. It was written in 2020. It was 35 pages long. And so in comparison, the current plan that we have is 177 pages and at least 77 more pages of addendum. And because of this, we're not moving to smaller government. We're moving to more power to the government and less to the people. And so where should we go? We should not, hang on. There we go. We should not pursue a plan that grows government. We should not pursue a plan that protects the environment over our current thriving community. We should not change things that currently work, and we should not let urban influences drive our future. We should not let outside entities define the kind of community that Bartlesville will become. So this new plan would take, my friend who's a developer actually read our plan, and he said it'll take a significant number of new planners, engineers, and experts to deal with this new type of zoning, all of this. It's going to slow the process. It's going to raise the cost to the developer, and that cost will then get passed along to the consumer. And what he recommended is thorough cost-benefit analysis before moving forward with increasing the plan. He gave me 3 examples of how these things actually impact the developer. One is when you dictate that a parking lot requires tree landscaping and islands. He said that just drives the cost up for a developer. He also said, this is not on a slide, I'm sorry, I should have. He also said that if you do a detached sidewalk with a tree lawn, it's double the cost of the rollover curb gutter. He also said that he's dealt with requiring certain tread width and riser height on stairs, and it actually consumes an additional 200 square feet of floor space. And he's like, there's no known benefit on if that's actually solving the problem it's trying to solve. He told me that a lot of communities will try to put in a lot more trees, for example, trees on their roadways. And he said this kind of opens up so many issues. Who plants the trees? Who pays for them? Are they planted in gravel or dirt? How are they taken care of? What if a blight hits the trees, takes out all that kind of trees? He said drought is an issue in Colorado. He said drought is an issue in Oklahoma. And he also said, or I thought about the fact that we face so many winds and tornadoes in this community. Do we really want streets added to main roads or trees added to main roads? Because if we get a tornado, we can't drive. So these are not specific to our plan. I feel like I've brought up plenty of specifics throughout, but this is just what a developer looks at and is concerned about when they're trying to look at these plans, because this is adding cost to them. He said that there was a development in Fort Collins where they were requiring mixed family, multifamily housing. He said what ended up happening was the developers didn't want to build it, the people living there didn't want it, and the people who lived in mixed multifamily housing didn't want to live in that neighborhood. And so for 30 to 40 years, these lots have sat empty because nobody wanted that for that community, but it was regulated to do so. And so let's talk positive. What should our community pursue? This is my opinion. We should make a plan made for Bartlesville, allowing for growth, but rejecting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the growth of government, and increased regulation. Mixed-use zoning is appropriate in some large developments, but not in a community of this size. It is, according to a land developer, it is appropriate for population centers of 100,000 plus with a university or government/global jobs. Bartlesville is a town of 30,000. Cities, what you regard as cities, are usually start at 60 to 70,000 is where your city mark begins. He also said because we're surrounded by agriculture and we have a rural density, which is your 3 units per acre. So it's the lot size. But he said in looking at our community, we have a high percentage of amenities. He was like, compared to any other town of your size, you have such a huge advantage, which I agree. That's why part of why my husband and I moved here. And so a proposal for a way forward would be to update the plan by running cost benefit analysis on some of these areas before they're fully implemented to assure it will not raise the cost of living here. To pursue input from residents of communities that have adopted such plans. So let's go he said, talk to the residents, the people who actually live under these plans and how they're actually working. The recommendation is a citizen review committee to build a common sense plan that updates the 1999 plan and uses some of the Endeavor 2045 plan, and to involve developers, home builders, and commercial developers in that conversation. He also said it would be wise to review a plan every 5 years. He said, your city, areas change every 5 years. He said 20 years is such a long time. He said even 5 years is hard to project. So he's like, have a review of this thing every 5 years so you know where your city is growing. And so with that, I think I'm at the end of what I had. But I just think we as citizens should be involved in this process. We should be watching what's being brought into our community. As an action step, what would be great is to reach out to our city councilors. So they have until December 4th to take in input from citizens on the plan as it stands right now and talk through amendments to that plan. And so I will make all of my documents available. I will put them on the Washington County GOP website. So wcgopok.com. So that everyone can go there, they can access them. I'll have them up. I'll just go ahead and get them up tonight so you guys all have access to all the documents that I talked through tonight so that you guys can look at those. Please look into these. There's a lot of links so you guys can see where I kind of got a lot of my definitions and stuff so you can read those for yourself. And then please give this feedback to our city councilors because I think there's a path forward that's best for Bartlesville, but that doesn't get us in a plan that's going to limit us to some sort of urban or smart cities or UN in